What up again, team? So I also wanted to go over the tier list that was put out by Ben, Jungron, Fubgun, Rutu, and like various others on Mobalytics. I believe this was put out like a day or two ago. And I wanted to give my perspective on it, kind of how I would approach it and how I would tier each of these ascendancies based on the build that I would play if I was playing that ascendancy. I'm mainly going to be focusing on the top part of the list because there's just a lot of the builds and ascendancies that I don't understand and the lower portions and things I would just never play, right? Like Acolyte of Keula, Chronomancer, for sure, I have no idea. The fucking bedsheet bandit that is tactician. I would sooner chop my balls off than play this fucking idiot. Give a couple of quick disclaimers. I'm not making this video because I think I know more than Ben, Jungron, Rutu, and Fubgun individually or all combined. All of these players on their own know far more than I ever will. They are far better than I will ever be. But I did want to give an alternate perspective because I find that they tend to be very min-maxy and hyper optimal, which of course is expected and that's totally fine. And I tend to be somewhere in the middle. I won't play like ultra slop dog shit, but I also don't like to min-max and play only hyper optimal. And I think that kind of being somewhere in the middle, that perspective is helpful to bridge the gap for a lot of casual players, especially in PoE 2, especially on a free weekend. The other thing I wanted to mention is that like we all understand that the patch notes are tentative and that there's a bunch of unknowns that could wildly change a lot of the conclusions and shift this entire tier list around. We get that. However, it's still the fact of the matter that we have available information and we should make the best conclusion that we can on said available information and just be accepting of the fact that we should take it with a grain of salt and it might change here and there. Of course, starting off with Deadeye, I really don't have any groundbreaking opinions or anything, any commentary really to add. I will point out though, that it does look like they continually are nerfing things. So for example, Eagle's Eye, I believe it started at 20 and now we're down to 5. So something to keep in mind. And then I did hear a rumor, wildly unconfirmed, so take it of course with a grain of salt, that there might actually be an internal cooldown on the auto marking system. So again, something to keep in mind. Of course, it still doesn't matter. Like one of the reasons that Deadeye is still good is because even in the case of all these different changes or what have you, it's still the best ascendancy for so many different options. It would be really hard to pin Deadeye down and make it not S tier. And that is also just from the perspective of power. We're not even covering the speed aspect of the ascendancy, which is one of the reasons why so many people run Deadeye. It's also, in my opinion, the primary reason why something like Warbringer is really, I would say, B or C tier. Next up is, of course, Blood Mage. I do agree with this positioning as well, and I think that Blood Mage is going to be absolutely stellar for this league. The buff to getting 2 extra ascendancy points is absolutely massive for this ascendancy. It needed it 100%. It did get a nerf on the overflow because overflow is now capped at 1.5x. It used to be double, but honestly, in my experience, I never really even experienced the overflow. Like, I feel like I was always losing life, so maybe I did it wrong. Regardless, Blood Mage is going to be one of your best all-around casters, and it will kind of fit the mold for pretty much anything. It's another really nice thing about this ascendancy is that like you're not specifically speccing into something, say as Stormweaver would, where Stormweaver is going into all infusions, that sort of thing. This is just a generalized casting shell that will work for pretty much whatever you want. Next up was Infernalist. I did actually disagree with this placement as well, but it's mainly because I just didn't really even understand why they put it where it was. I personally would only ever play Infernalist for demon form to run a casting style build, and I remember thinking to myself, well, demon form is probably going to be difficult to get off the ground. There's kind of a lot of things that you have to get in place to make it really functional and viable. They mention that here. They say when solved, it will be much better this patch, which makes sense to me. They rated Infernalist second because of the minions that it provides. I didn't even think about it as like a minion ascendancy. The issue I have with minion players is I think I have more in common with a fucking coral reef. Oh, I can't wait to show off my army of scorpions at FurryCon. They're gonna sting ya. Yeah, that's really great, man. I think I'm gonna go provide housing for clownfish and choke to death on unrecycled plastic. From a casting perspective, I would put Infernalist pretty low, actually, because the downside of Demon Form can be somewhat difficult to deal with, especially if you don't have a whole lot of gear, especially if you're on a fresh character with not a whole lot of currency. And then just in general, the Infernalist Ascendancy has a lot of push and pull in terms of the power that's granted by the Ascendancy nodes themselves. And while these are not necessarily terrible to work with, it does provide barriers that you have to solve early on, which can be quite difficult on a starter character where you don't have a whole lot of levels, not a whole lot of gear, currency, etc., etc. The next best casting ascendancy, in my opinion, is of course Lich. I think Lich is insanely strong. It'll be probably, in my opinion, one of the smoother / safer league starters just in general. So for example, Soulless Form and Eternal Life give you so much tankiness. It's very easy to build defenses on the Lich. Crystalline Phylactery is just a nice kind of versatile node that you can use for whatever you need. Price of Power got buffed, so if you are able simple to figure out power charge generation. This is 40% more damage for whatever skill consumes a power charge. Honestly, I don't even think Necromantic Conduit is that bad. 30% damage is extra chaos. Can be good in some cases. Obviously, you have dog shit, not the same as Profane Bloom, Rupture the Soul, which is gut-wrenching. It ruptures my soul, actually, which is where the name comes from, because it's not the same, but that's okay. And then I think Eldritch Empowerment, though, I would stay away from this node. Again, going back to that push and pull thing, and this got nerfed, by the way. It's now 5% of your maximum energy. That can be kind of costly. Again, early on, you don't have gear currency and methods to deal with the drawbacks of certain things. Lich was one of the starters I was really interested in, and I was very close to going. I have a theory crafted build for it on my channel in another video that I just posted. I will say really quick, Rupture the Soul is actually pretty good, although I don't think you would need it if you're running ED Contagion, because I did fuck around with this quite a bit, and honestly, Contagion is just gross. And I like the idea of going Black Flame Covenant to get your purple fireball, that sort of thing. That's a whole nother video and a whole nother topic. But yeah, overall, I think Lich is for sure probably the second best caster ascendancy. In the last of the A tiers, we have Witch Hunter, which I also agree with the placement of. I would say Witch Hunter, Lich, and Blood Mage are kind of interchangeable. I think Witch Hunter has insane late game scaling because of the 100 weapon set passives that it offers. With the buffs to evasion and kind of getting deflection, you can just run all evasion, take deflection, and then you have all of that evasion for your Sork Ward. I think Witch Hunter just in general is going to be bonkers in the later game, and that was really where it struggled. Like, I don't think Witch Hunter was particularly good in the late game. I think it was extremely strong and one of the most smooth starters early on because of some setups you can get with gear to give it insane clear with very, very little investment. But the problem was the ascendancy kind of just didn't really go anywhere from there. With the 100 weapon set passives, that will completely change and it will be fucking disgusting. Thank God, because Witch Hunter is sick. Also, remember your Deadeye roleplay boat hat. The next one up is Stormweaver. I would actually put Stormweaver in A tier in my opinion. I think Stormweaver is going to do a fucking ass ton of damage, and I think the infusion generation is going to be kind of a big deal. I think probably the better way that I would word this is that the power of Stormweaver is dependent upon how necessary the ascendancy is to have infusion uptime. And that's kind of what they're saying. It's essentially exactly what they're saying here. If it is the case that we need infusions and Stormweaver is the only ascendancy that can have 100% uptime on infused abilities, then yeah, Stormweaver is for sure A tier. It's for sure a very strong character for that reason. Again, assuming that the infused abilities don't suck balls and all that stuff. However, the caveat here is that if it is the case that Stormweaver, the ascendancy is not required to maintain 100% infusion uptime, and the opportunity cost for maintaining said infusion uptime isn't insane, I actually think Stormweaver is pretty bad in that regard. I would never consider it over Blood Mage or Lich, and I would honestly probably put it C tier if that was the case. I really don't like the Stormweaver ascendancy. I don't think it offers a whole lot that's pretty good. But as of right now, assuming that infusions are strong and the infusion ascendancies are required, Stormweaver's looking pretty good. Tri-Ele stuff got a lot of buffs. Trinity got buffs, so it now applies to all spell damage or all spell elemental damage as well as attack elemental damage. On top of that, it looks like we'll have quite a bit of access to pen for Tri-Ele, which was always a big problem of Tri-Ele stuff. They mentioned that actually in the reveal specifically. Honestly, this is like one of my new philosophies for whenever I'm picking builds on a new patch. I swear to God, whatever is buffed or new is always just going to be absurd, and that's kind of what I'm banking on, so we will find out. Amazon is another one of those ones where it's kind of just completely up in the air, in my opinion. Critical Strike was nerfed, and it was a pretty significant nerf, but I also think the accuracy buffs probably go a little bit further than what they listed in the patch notes, and that's pure conjecture, by the way. This is like me totally just talking out of my ass, but it wouldn't surprise me because accuracy buffing it was very thematic in a lot of these patch notes, so it wouldn't surprise me if in some of those new passive wheels we had better access to accuracy and that sort of thing. That's kind of what I would bank on if you're a hard Amazon enjoyer. But other than that, yeah, I mean, just go fucking Deadeye. This is everything better. This is absolutely true. Pathfinder is one of those ascendancies that I still don't totally understand. I don't even really know how poison damage works. I tried a little bit and I did not enjoy it at all. They also fundamentally changed poison concoction. It doesn't actually poison now. It's called acidic concoction, and it deals unscalable damage to the remaining damage of the consumed poison. So it kind of has a different wonky playstyle now, so you have to use something else to poison, which may or may not be good. And then it did get a pretty significant buff to sustainable practices. I don't even know if people run this. Yeah, I'm not really going to comment on Pathfinder. I think it looks cool. It also has immunity to slows, which is sick as fuck. That's probably the coolest part of this entire ascendancy. And finally, the last two that I want to talk about in tandem are Warbringer and Smith the Katava. And these ones are kind of weird because I actually think that Warbringer and Smith are going to deal a fuck ton of damage. I was going through some of my notes on Warbringer, and it really does feel like there actually is going to be a ton of extra damage coming through for warriors. But really my big issue is the speed of warriors is is just fucking miserable. And like the idea that you're just gonna sprint around everywhere and sprint is gonna solve that, you're gonna sprint to your death so many times. You're gonna get RKO'd by a fucking arrow from some dipshit archer miles off screen, and then all of his little minions are gonna come gangbang you on the ground. That is the fucking future of every warrior player, and I just cannot get behind even like considering recommending it for that reason. Also, kind of a new change that I don't think was made at the time that they made this tier list is that they're using the old version of Fallen, and that was changed recently, yesterday, or today, in fact, excuse me. It no longer has the minus 20% maximum block chance, or 10 to 20. It now says you take 15 to 20% of damage from blocked hits. And then Renly's training is 30% damage from blocked hits, and you go to 75 and you get the lucky, so it's like 88. And I think that that is actually just, I think that's nerf. This means something. It's so twisty. I don't know exactly what it means, but like, okay, theoretically, if you have a 100% chance to block, you would still take 45% damage from blocked hits in like the best case scenario. This is mathematically essentially the same as having regular block with 100% of damage mitigated from hits. So I don't actually know what this means, but I think this means that all this shit's like kind of a meme and there's no reason to do it, maybe? I don't know. Someone fucking Alkaiser needs to figure this shit out right now. Aside from whatever the implications are of all the block changes, ultimately, I think that Warrior probably won't be as bad as people say it is from again, the functionality of like its output. Theory crafting with Warbringer, it does seem like it is going to deal an ass ton of damage just from all the different things that's going on. They did nerf the Leech off of Rage, which does suck because Leech was kind of the way I built my Warrior out, and I felt that I didn't use block on mine, and I felt that my Earthshatter Warbringer was cracked the fuck out. But that also was a Leech stacker, and I had like fucking AK health per second, so it was kind of insane. I do think that they're probably going to buff life or something, hence the nerf to Giant's Blood. That's kind of the only thing that really makes sense to me, because I just don't know how else you would make this viable, or like what one-handers are going to look like. But my general assumption here is they're probably going to offset a lot of these nerfs with something. That's what I assume. And again, I am talking on my ass. Once again, this is pure conjecture because we don't know. But they did say that everything was buffed. It doesn't make sense to gut warriors so hard in the patch notes and then give nothing to offset it. So I personally wouldn't doom too hard about the actual output and survivability of warriors and what they can and cannot do. Really, in my opinion, the problem with warriors is that they're just so fucking slow. I don't think sprint is gonna fix that. You're just gonna be this slow meandering ogre, and every single time you try to sprint, you're gonna get your ankles blackjacked by fucking Orlando Bloom off screen, and then the Trojans are gonna come take 10% while he bangs Helen. You're fucked, dude. There's no shot. That's pretty much all I have for my thoughts on this tier list. Of course, all my disagreements are really just based on perspective. They're not really like an objective, like, no, this can't be B or whatever the fuck. It's just kind of how I would have approached it. I'm not gonna say anything else about these other senses because I would just be talking out of my fucking ass, and I have zero idea on what any of this shit does. So I'll let them handle that. Once again, they know far more than I do. To end on a positive note, I do think there's a lot more build diversity in 0.3 that will be viable for endgame than this tier list kind of lets on. And I don't think that's through any fault of them. I think there's just a lot of unknown shit that they can't really comment on, and they're making the right call of not being like, oh yeah, fucking Jackie Chan Invoker's gonna pop the fuck off. And it's like, well, I mean, maybe it will, but we don't have the numbers, the values, that sort of thing. So they can't say shit like that, which I think is totally fair. But that doesn't mean we can't hope for it. And given all the unknown stuff and all the potential changes and blah, 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 yada, yada, I really do feel like this patch is going to have a ton of build diversity because it feels like that was the thing they focused on the most. And so we'll just have to see. I think it's going to be a banger. 0.3 is going to slap. I will see you guys tomorrow for the league start. Deuces.